All right, well, joining me now to talk more about what is moving markets is Mindy McIntosh, founder and CEO of McIntosh and Associates. Mindy, thanks so much for joining the show today. Some decent gains, a bit of a recovery, I would say, in stocks. What's your take on the current state of the market?
I think we really need to take a look at what consumers are seeing, and we're seeing this with these index reports coming out that people are still worried about what's happening with interest rates. And I'm not sure how the feds are going to be able to lower these currently with just what we're seeing happening. And you're talking a lot about what's happening with tech companies and AI stocks. I just think that we continuously see, even at the consumer level, what they're going to be investing in is we need to keep always a diversified portfolio. So many folks are really wanting to go super heavy AI. Yes, we see what's happening, Alphabet, the Meta and Apples of the world. But how do we stay well diversified and then still maintaining kind of our day-to-day living of just what consumers are feeling like? Most of our folks are looking at or nearing retirement. And so when they look at even what's happening from this interest rates and inflation, they're wondering, do I downsize a home? What would I do if I need a new mortgage? And so people just start to become a little bit worried about what we're seeing coming up. And with it being an election year, there's a lot to still see yet this year, I feel.
So I'd be interested to gauge, Mindy, based on your clientele, of course, the data that we see too, what is the sentiment? It sounds like some caution, some trepidation. Can you crystallize it or provide a few more details for us?
I truly feel like we're going to see caution, especially from this. What we see is coming out. We're not going to see a big change, I don't think, with these numbers coming out today. And I really think that a lot of that just means people start to cool down a little bit of where they're investing in what sectors. They're not as eager to put more money into the market currently. They're wondering what's going to happen, what's next. I want to make sure we don't hit a point of, stagflation of where we're seeing that we're going. And that kind of makes people hot and pause. So we'll see factors then of probably changes even coming up more so this spring of how much traveling is being done. We're seeing pressure at the grocery store by folks. They're just wondering and concerned what will happen next. And they really want to see with what just happened to GDP of, are we going to see some inflation and interest rates change and come down? And I'm just not seeing where we're going to be able to sustain this yet. If that were to happen, that's good, right? It just means that mortgage rates would then start to come down. We'd see some CD rates not be as high as they have been on the short term. So just looking at some other alternative and treasuries there, and maintaining well diversified, but just being ready for what is coming next, I think is key here.
So how would you recommend that your clients invest based on that reality?
I think they really need to be careful of, obviously, with well diversified, using a variety too of maybe even some ETFs, and just making sure that they're not too heavy in AI. Watch out for what is actually happening in the tech stocks. Keep some, footprint there, but just make sure that we're looking at how do we have some bond alternatives in our portfolio. Make sure that we're actually getting some gains and growth and hedging inflation, and then just balancing out what do we need from a taxable and standpoint as well too, because we also have to still continue to look at legislative risk. So making sure that we have our income platform, building the house solid foundation there of what we call building a house here for our retirement planning, and making sure that folks then aren't too heavy in one area. So they have their income footprint, they know what's happening in the market, they have some of their own wild cards, and making sure that we're having a really solid plan and just keeping up with education and making sure that folks don't just read the headlines, but we really dig deep into what is causing this, what's happening. And then as we're chatting here, what we see happening over the next 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months to make sure that we're in the right spot.
I want you to weigh in on stagflation. We've been talking a lot about inflation for years now, and we've seen above trend inflation, certainly above the Fed's long-term 2% target. For more than 2 years now. But stagflation is a new term, right, that just kind of came into the vernacular or the conversation. Obviously, it's been a term that's been around for a very long time. But this week, with that disappointing GDP report, as you referenced earlier, slower than expected growth, inflation still above trend. It's kind of the worst of both worlds, right? If inflation's going to be high, you also want to see growth high as well. Does that mean that the Fed would actually consider cutting rates? Because It's kind of odd, right, that the Fed wants to cool down on rate cuts as now there is a concern about slowing growth.
Well, there isn't. So it's kind of like all eyes on how are investors going to respond and how can the feds make these changes when, yes, you're seeing kind of both ways. We're not seeing that reporting come out the way that they had expected. We're kind of having a somewhat of a lag. And then even when you take a look at some of the other numbers, if we see any sort of like cool down, that's going to bolster what's happening outside here in local and global economy. And then we take a look at how are the consumers reacting to this. So I'm just not sure how one can make a change without the other. And really, when we look at both of these, we got to be really careful with how these series of what we're even seeing on day to day of what's happening in the tech carriers and such. How would this happen? What are they going to do there? And we really need to look at even just, personal finances. We really need to dig deep in there. And then historically, indexes have been, displaying kind of consumer confidence. So when we take a look right now, how are the consumers going to be super confident when we continuously not hit these numbers that we're hoping to hit, even by fractions of a percentage point, makes a big difference in what we're actually seeing day to day. So I'm not sure how, yes, this is a new term, stagflation, which sometimes can be rougher than a recession because we just have to look from each angle of what actually truly is going to happen.
Interesting. I do want to talk about artificial intelligence because that's been a key theme that we've seen play out over the past 18 months, up until about the past few weeks or so. Amid slowing growth, we had seen a lot of these tech names rip on hype around artificial intelligence. Do you think it's overdone, even with the pullback that we've seen of late?
I personally do. I think it's just a little bit too much. And to me, too much of any one good thing is too much, especially when it comes to having some market risk in the approach. So I think when we take a look at what's happening with some of these companies, and even yes, Google's doing well, and there's so much AI focus, and of course there's going to be more usage in Google and Siri and things here. But I think that we still need to continuously, even from a personal standpoint, keep that personal feel. Even when we talk about restaurant industry and such, we need to make sure that AI doesn't go too far. So being diversified, not all eggs in one basket. Don't put too much in any one sector. We all see what happened with Meta. We need to be super careful about how heavily we're going into these areas. And then just to know, like, hey, did you ride the wave? Where is that wave at? It is going to stop at some point. Are we near that ceiling? We're not sure, but we need to make sure if you've already kind of won the game or done well, make sure you're adjusting, realigning, pull back a little bit there, and just be well segmented.
Okay. Mindy McIntosh, founder and CEO of McIntosh and Associates. Mindy, thank you.